how will we know when it's okay to go back to normal?
And we are getting back to normal. I see it.
A lot of them was like, I just want things to go back to normal.
There will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future.
Will life ever return to normal after lockdown?
You're wondering when life will go back to normal. It really depends on who you ask.
Life as we know it is now over. It is never going to go back to normal.
I mean, we've got 100,000 spectators expected to watch this parade and hang out at Street Fest. You absolutely can!
Normal. What was the original normal? By this I mean the biblical belief, not the worldly or evolutionary view. The biblical view of normal will amaze as to its prominence above any previous conceived normal. If you are an evolutionary believer, this video may seem foolish, and there's a reason for that. If you are holding on to that view, you should research the fact that evolutionary theory is being abandoned by mainstream science in favor of intelligent design. Remember, evolution is a theory and is by definition unproven. Science means knowing. An example of true science is the current observation that word definitions are changing rapidly before our eyes. You can document this fact, and you're actually aware of it from your own personal experience. Science is not taking something by faith, but by having hard science behind a belief. Say, for instance, over 2,000 biblical prophecies come true exactly as predicted. Only 8 prophecies being fulfilled makes for incredible odds against the chance of randomness. Over 2,000 fulfilled Bible prophecies makes randomness impossible, mathematically speaking. Compare these odds, reference Darwinian evolution of the species, to the odds of biblical prophecies fulfilled. They are two very diametrically opposed outcomes. Basing your beliefs on Darwinianism is a Vegas win chance of astronomical odds against you winning, or against this belief being true. Again, evolution of the species, Darwinianism, is only one of the many types of evolution beliefs needed to have a complete explanation of life as we observe today. Counter this to basing your beliefs on Scripture is an astronomically minuscule chance of losing, because prophetic fulfillment and the odds of being wrong is such a small chance of losing that a wrong decision is mathematically beyond ridiculous and exceeds the number of observable electrons in the universe. Scripture also is a complete explanation of all that is, whereas Darwinianism only accounts for the species. Therefore, the Bible is beyond exponentially more properly called science compared to Darwinianism and the Big Bang, which are extreme fantasy from a mathematical possibility perspective. Don't get lost in the truth of a simple explanation. On the one hand, you have impossible odds for something being true, evolution, and on the other hand, you have extraordinary odds in favor of something being true, creation. Current science is ever learning, but, well, here's the Scripture. Pontius Pilate states, "What is truth?" Pilate doesn't understand the truth that stands before him intellectually, much less have the truth in his heart. The masses today are just like Pilate, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth, professing themselves to be wise. Well, here's the verse. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. The evolutionary ship type of thinking is sinking, and since the news of the day doesn't cover this, one should become personally responsible and active to research any beliefs held. This is, of course, if one is in search of the truth. If one is strictly seeking an agenda and not the truth, then turn this off and continue their lie. The soon coming metaverse matrix welcomes you to a life of delusion. In the process, you will lose your own soul. If this lie is your passion, then believe whatever you want to believe. Again, movies prep us for the future. Wake
You
up
take
in your
the
bed
blue
tomorrow,
pill. The story ends.
believe whatever you
You
want
wake
to
up in
believe.
your bed and believe whatever you want to believe.
There is an example of early Christians researching and ensuring the Apostle Paul's mission was accurate. The Bereans in Acts 17:11. These were more noble than those in Thessalonica in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily whether those things were so. The evolutionary view is also extreme racism, and possibly for that reason the shift to Prometheus theory or intelligent design is well underway. See video 1. Can our belief in what is called science be trusted at all?
Here is a galaxy, and it has a companion galaxy next to it. This galaxy here, the large central one, has a redshift of around 8,700 kilometers per second. Remember, I told you astronomers always write redshift down as a velocity, so don't be concerned about that. This one here, which is next to it, has a redshift of 17,000 kilometers per second. According to the Hubble law, which says the greater the distance, the greater the redshift, it would mean that this galaxy would be close and this galaxy should be very, very far in the background. And this is what the Big Bang community would say, that it's an accidental coincidence that this galaxy just lies so close to the other one in the line of sight. They are not actually physically close to each other. Okay, that would be fair enough, but there's a problem. Alton Arp has found, and it's hard to see here, but there are bridges of material that actually physically connect the two galaxies. They are physically connected to each other with gases that emit X-rays and other material, stars and dust and so on. So this brings into doubt the whole Hubble law regime upon which Big Bang cosmology hangs.
What you're saying there is, don't be overawed by someone saying, A, I'm a scientist, and B, I'm an atheist. Don't suppose that statement B derives any particular authority from statement A. That's what you're saying, right?
The comparable claim would be, A, I'm a scientist, B, I'm an expert on contract law.
Right. Right.
Well, you're expert on contract law because you study particle physics, give me a break.
Right.
Expert on the existence of God because you studied particle physics. I request the same break, the same suspension of belief, the same absence of commitment to whatever it is you're saying. And these guys are, of course, shameless. They're just shameless. One of a number of physicists, certainly not the only one. Fred Hoyle, who was a very serious 20th century astrophysicist, came to the same conclusion. He said the universe looks like it's been monkeyed with by a super intellect. Things are so precisely coordinated. Numerical values for certain parameters are so finely adjusted, and if they were perturbed in any way, things would collapse or the universe would become chaotic or living systems couldn't arise, that we cannot conclude that this was all the result of any kind of accidental process. It's inherent in the design.
The laws of the universe are consistent with the notion of the Judeo-Christian idea of a creator who set it up. That's consistent with what we see in the Anthropic.
Completely.
Okay. But you're not saying, you're saying only that it's consistent. You're not taking it a step further to argue that it is evidence or even suggestive that there may be a creator.
An intelligent designer admittedly stops short of revealing who that designer is. Acknowledgement of who the designer is would lead to a responsibility to find out what is required of that designer, that creator. Or you could fight the creator and come up with your own plan.
You spin the roulette wheel and the ball falls on number 7. And you could spend the rest of your life saying, with all those possible slots, why did it fall on number 7? Why should that have been? Well, it was because it was. It was an accident, right? So you can't really get very far. You can't construct much of a proof of the existence of a
No.
creator. You can't.
No, you can't. But you can construct an argument, something short of a proof.
All right.
I agree. If the ball drops in the slot mark number 7 just once, you can say, well, and you get a big payoff. It's interesting, drop once. If it drops in number 7 again and again and again, at some point you would be entitled to scratch your head and say, you know, the game must be fixed.
I want you to at least in your imagination, assume you have a pad in front of you, and I want to talk a little bit about sevens in the Bible. And they occur in over 600 passages. I probably should have said 700. Some are very overt. Some are structural. You really have to, and some of them are even hidden. But the sevens are everywhere. In fact, there's a discovery that I want to touch on about called the heptadic structure of the Bible. I want you to imagine a challenge. Imagine yourself being assigned in that classroom context with a blank sheet of paper. And what I want you to imagine, you don't have to literally do it, but I want you in your mind's eye to accept an assignment to create a genealogy. You can do it from fiction if you like. But I want the number of words that you're going to end up using to be divisible by 7. In other words, if you take, when you finish making your little genealogy, if you count the words and divide by 7, there should be no remainder. In other words, I want you to have your assignment a multiple of 7 exactly. How many could do that? It's not hard to do, especially in English. You can fudge it around, okay. Except I got another condition I want you to meet. I want the number of letters that you use, if you count them up, to be divisible by 7 exactly. Now that's a little tougher, isn't it? Because you might get the words come out, but you need to get the letters to come out. But by fudging around, you could probably do that. Except I want the number of vowels and the number of consonants each to be a multiple of 7. How many are still playing with me? Okay. Well, I've got some additional rules I want your assignment to meet. I want the number of words that begin with a vowel to be divisible by 7. I want the number of words that begin with a consonant to be divisible by 7. And I have some other things. I want the number of words that occur more than once to be a multiple of 7 exactly. And I'd like to have those that occur in more than one form to be divisible by 7. And those that are in only one form divisible by 7. How many are still playing? Okay. You realize every time I impose another 7-fold rule, you've got 6 chances of losing and 1 of winning just by randomness. You with me? Okay. The number of nouns should be divisible by 7. Only 7 words won't be nouns. And the number of names should be divisible by 7. Only 7 other kinds of nouns are permitted. Anyone still playing? Okay. And so what you probably, some other things here. The number of male names is divisible by 7, number of generations. And you've probably guessed what I'm doing here. I'm describing to you the genealogy of Jesus Christ in the first 11 verses of the Gospel of Matthew. They meet all those rules. Now you can't imagine doing that yourself. And I'm talking about Greek, which is rigid. Every Greek verb has to meet 5 conditions. It's much more structured than our English that we're used to. And so the precision, what I'm trying to get across is that we discover as you investigate the text, it has properties that are not simulatable. Trying to do that even with the aid of a computer is a almost impossible task. See, Greek also is one of the 2 languages. There's 2 languages that have a numerical value for every letter in their alphabet. Hebrew and Greek have that peculiar characteristic. That means that every word has a value. They call it the geometrical value. And we could go through this of the rest of chapter 1 and find it still obeys dozens of these 7-fold challenges. I won't go through them all here, but almost every characteristic you measure turns out to be a number that's an exact multiple of 7. Now, the child of Christ in Matthew 2, same also fits all of that, and we could go on and on about this. The chances of these things happening by statistical accident are phenomenally unlikely. If I just have 2 of these, if I have 1 rule of 7, you've got 6 chances of losing, 1 of winning, right? But if I have 2 rules, that's 1 chance in 7 squared, or 49. In other words, you have by randomness, you have 1 chance in 49 of it coming out the way you want it. You with me? And if I have 3 of those, it's 1 chance in 343. See, it's always the exponent of the number you're looking at. And so if I have 4, you have 1 chance in 2,400 of getting it by just statistical accident. And so if you go down this list, I've given you 9 rules so far. Those 9 rules mean that you have 1 chance in 40 million of having it come out right by just statistical accident. Once you understand the statistical behavior, the more rules there are, the more unlikely it is to come about by anything other than deliberate design. And so, if you'd like to try this, let's assume you say, well, I can try to do that. If I've got to do that, if I worked 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 2,000 man-hours a year in effect, and 7 to 9 chances means I've got to have 40 million attempts to try to get it by randomness. If I can do, it takes 10 minutes at a time to write one of these genealogies, then that would take 400 million minutes, or over 3,000 years. But it gets worse than that. That's just a quick approximation. Let's look at further. If I go on with these words, these rules, it turns out that I can give you actually 34 of these. And that's 1 chance in oodles. Okay? And so, if you still want to try doing this mechanically, and that means you got 7 to the 34th power, that's 5 times 10 to the 25th tries would be needed, and there are 3 times 10 to the 7th tries in seconds per year. Let's assume you had a supercomputer that would do 400 million of these per second. How long would it have to work? It still would have to work over 4 times 10 to the 12th computer years. In other words, if I had 1 million of these supercomputers, it still would take over 4 million years. I think it's across that this is not something that could happen by randomness. And this was only with 34. Dr. Ivan Panin, who's researched this, who discovered these things, he identified 75, not 34 rules, and that goes beyond our imagining. Dr. Ivan Panin, born in Russia back in 1855, exiled at an early age, got involved in a plot against the Tsar, emigrated to Germany and then the US. He graduated from Harvard in 1882. And interestingly enough, he discovered Christ. Now, every one of us in this room that has discovered Christ are the result of a miracle. But if you've got a PhD from Harvard, that's a bigger miracle. Okay. And so, but he also discovered early in his career what he calls the heptadic structure of the Scripture. And back in 1890, actually. He committed the rest of his 50 years of his life generating over 43,000 pages of discoveries. Very dry reading, but staggering in their implications. Because among other things, it tells you there are all kinds of properties of the Torah that depend on the precise letters that you're using, which tells you not only did God give Moses the Torah, he gave it to Moses letter by letter. You pull one letter out of that and some of those properties start to dissipate. Staggering implication to an information scientist. The vocabulary in the Gospel of Matthew that is unique to the Gospel of Matthew happens to be a multiple of 7. It occurs 42 times, that's 7 times 6. It has 126 letters, that's 7 times 18. And that's the only property that these words have is that they are unique to the Gospel of Matthew. And they come out precisely as a multiple of 7. You with me so far? My question is, gee, that's interesting. How could that have been organized? Let's imagine that Matthew deliberately tried to make it come out that way. How would you go about doing that? There's only 2 ways you could do that. One is you could have all the other authors of the New Testament agree not to use those words. How many think that happened? I don't think so. Well, the other way, you could use that argument linguistically to prove that Matthew must have written his last. That's the only way he could preserve that property, right? So I could use that as an argument, at least, that Matthew wrote his document last. Well, that's pretty interesting. So, Gospel of Matthew wrote his last, except I discovered that when I look at the Gospel of Mark, it has the same property. That the words that are unique to the Gospel of Mark are a multiple of 7 exactly. That proves that Mark was written last. Well, no, wait a minute. If I look at the Gospel of Luke, it also has that property, that the words that are unique to his writing in the New Testament, those words, there's the number of words that are unique to him are a multiple of 7 exactly. That proves that Luke wrote his last, except so did John. Each one of these wrote theirs last. In fact, so did James, Peter, Jude, and Paul. Each wrote last. Each one of their writings, the collective writings, has a vocabulary unique to them. Staggering. Staggering. You can't prove the Bible. Yes, you can. The more you know about the information sciences, the more you discover that we're dealing with something that is supernatural.
I agree. If the ball drops in the slot mark number 7 just once, you can say, well, and you get a big payoff. It's interesting, drop once. If it drops in number 7, again and again and again, at some point you would be entitled to scratch your head and say, you know, the game must be fixed. Again and again and again, again and again and again.